Welcome to Cam Look, your daily dose of the Cincinnati Art Museum. Each weekday, a staff member or volunteer will be sharing an object from the permanent collection and posing questions for discussion. Please check back at 10 a.m. every day for a new work and a new conversation. My name is Andrea Gutmann Fuentes, and I'm a member of the Ohio History Service Corps, an AmeriCorps program dedicated to building capacity for local history organizations around Ohio. And I'm currently serving at the Cincinnati Art Museum. For today's Cam Look, I sat down with the director of the Cincinnati Fire Museum, Sarah Strickland, to discuss Neal Slavin's 1979 photograph, New York City Fire Department, New York, New York, from his series When Two or More Are Gathered Together, and to learn more about firefighting culture.
I'm Sarah Strickland, and I'm privileged to be the executive director of the Cincinnati Fire Museum. When you sent me that photograph of the firefighters in the 70s standing in front of their firehouse, it spoke to me right away. The firehouse is so gorgeous. To think that it's a municipal building in New York City and that firefighters live there and work there, I just think the building is beautiful. It reminds me of the building the Fire Museum in Cincinnati exists in. We also exist in a beautiful municipal building that I'm so glad and thankful the city had the foresight to preserve. And just the building itself is a preservation of history. But the photograph here, I love the old turnouts that the guys are wearing. That's when they wore rubber coats and rubber boots, and those yellow stripes, they're still significant when thinking of firefighters today. You think of the reflective stripes, especially in the FDNY. I was fortunate to run the Fire Museum in New York City for several years, and all of our volunteers were so incredibly special, and I've seen photos of all of them in the same uniform. One gentleman who was very near and dear to me, Wally Malone, he worked at the Nut House in Brooklyn, and he worked for a rescue company in Brooklyn, and he had some fire stories that were just out of this world. In the 70s in New York City, it was called the war years for the fire department because there was a fiscal crisis, there was depression, there was all riots, there was so much. The blackout, there was a famous blackout. So all these things were happening and firefighters were on the front lines of it. And his stories were just incredible. His name was Wally Malone. I'm going to send you a photo of him in his turnout gear that looks just like this, except for the yellow is black. And that's like representative of how many fires he actually fought. But another thing about this photo that I love is one of the traditions at the FDNY Museum is for Santa to get rescued by a ladder company. What they called a truck company in New York. And as I zoomed in and read the building, I realized it is the same company that saves Santa every year at the Fire Museum. And so in Cincinnati, I brought that tradition in New York here to Cincinnati, and we have an annual Santa rescue. We just had ours last Saturday. That was well attended, and people watched from the safety of their cars so we could social distance and kind of offer a goodwill gesture to the community during a difficult time. But the parallels that this photograph just happened to land in my lap and that I have like a personal connection to it just speaks like wonders to me. So I'm so happy to get to talk about that. It brings me a lot of joy. The photographer, what he says about how he's getting all, basically individual personalities in a group, and your persona changes once you're in the group, like that speaks to firefighting so much. Firefighter, it's a whole culture. It's a career, but it's a culture, and it's very family oriented. It's fellowship. It's, firefighters just take a lot of pride and loyalty in what they do and how they serve their community and the group they're with. And that goes back to the volunteer days. You see these when you come here, and when you go to any fire museum in the nation, really, you'll see that the old wooden fire apparatus were all decorated very ornately, and they just took a lot of pride in how they took care of their apparatus, and all of that is just kind of that group persona and that loyalty. But there was one part of a quote that he had said that said, I want my work to affirm our self-identity within our public persona, to affirm the joy of being together rather than being apart. And that, again, to affirm the joy of being together rather than being apart. Not only does that speak to like the culture of firefighting, but also it just reminded me of this current time of the pandemic, like the joy of being together. Like there's no better time in history that I'm realizing the joy of being together rather than being apart. So that definitely speaks to me. So I've given this photograph a lot of thought. So I'm so glad
Yes.
away. So it's been a difficult year for the Fire Museum, as it's been for all small businesses and nonprofits, especially cultural institutions. We were kind of forced to think creatively for how to serve our mission outside the brick and mortar of our museum. So I created an online series inviting in a lot of different community members who are really prominent in the community and organizations. And I'm so proud to say we had JMR of Cincinnati Pops here, and he married the sounds of firefighting with music, and he did a little conducting lesson. We've had an FC player come in to read a storybook. We've had JMR was so impressed with the space that he had Cincinnati Symphony come back and they performed, and they actually utilized a bell that was on a fire engine in our collection as part of percussion. The Cincinnati Zoo brought a penguin in, and the penguin toured our galleries with an active duty firefighter, and they talking about the mutual need of for water that a penguin and a firefighter has. So we were propelled into the online world, and it's really been a great thing for us. It's something we kind of needed to do. At the museum, we actually have active duty firefighters as docents. So when you come and take a tour at the Fire Museum, you have not only the history of how the fire department was formed and how the equipment and tactics have changed, but you get personal knowledge from an active duty firefighter to tell you about personal stories of fighting fires, and how they've seen fires occur and prevention tips. And that is one of my favorite parts of the museum. I mean, their personalities that they infuse into their tours as just make it a ton of fun and so interesting, and they're just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to fire history.
If you would like to learn more about the Cincinnati Fire Museum, you can like them on Facebook at Cincy Fire Museum or follow them on Instagram at Cincinnati Fire Museum. The museum is located at 315 West Court Street and is open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 4. And there's free parking. Thank you for joining me today for Cam Look, and we'll see you back tomorrow for another one.